In this video, we're looking at UFC 310. I'm going to give you my predictions for each one of these fights, so make sure you watch until the end. And as always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. Happy to see you. It's been too long. At the top of the card, we have flyweight gold on the line, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know what we're doing. I feel like it's a really big gamble by the UFC to have Asakura making his debut in a title fight against Pantoja. Because what happens if he loses? If he loses, he's just the guy that lost to Pantoja, and he probably shouldn't have been fighting the champion in his debut anyway. Now, if he wins, it's obviously great for business, but I feel like this is a bad matchup for him. At striking range, I think Asakura is better. He's taller, he's longer, I think he hits harder, I think he's got much better knees from outside, maybe the best knees on the outside that you've ever seen. Great timing, folds guys up, very accurate, and he throws a lot of them. And Pantoja's going to be crashing the distance often to try to get to the clinch, because that's where Pantoja wins this fight. If he can consistently get the fight to the mat, he's going to win. So for Kai Asakura, he's live for a knockout, especially with those knees when Pantoja closing the gap, but I don't know if that happens. I would have much rather seen Asakura fight two top level guys in the UFC. If he wins those fights, then fight for the title. I could see also why, because there's not a whole lot of guys left for Pantoja to fight. But if you kept him on the shelf for a while, I don't know, maybe. If Muhammad Mokaev didn't get cut, we wouldn't even be here right now. But I'm not overthinking the main event here. The pick will be Alexandre Pantoja. I think he's got a huge advantage on the ground. He's not really somebody who's going to get knocked out or hurt all that often with strikes anyway. He's faced much better competition. He's beaten better fighters than Kai Asakura, in my opinion, and this is also Asakura's UFC debut, so if he's got any kind of jitters, any kind of nervous energy coming into this, and he doesn't perform at his absolute best, which is common, then he doesn't get it done this week. So give me the champion, give me the Brazilian, give me the favorite, and still give me Alexandre Pantoja to win this fight by decision. Next, we're looking at a fight between Shavkat Rakhmonov. He's fighting Garry this week. This is the fight to make at 170 pounds. Undefeated contenders, putting it all on the line this week, looking to take the other's O, looking to protect their own O. Outside of fighting for a championship, the stakes don't get higher than this, so super excited for the main event. I'll tell you right now off the bat, the line is a little wide. How can anybody at 170 pounds be this big of a favorite over Garry? Now, I understand why the line might be set the way it is, because people are lower on Garry and higher on Rakhmonov, and for good reason. Garry's had closer fights and longer fights in the UFC versus Shavkat, who's just running through guys. And the only time somebody gave him a little bit of resistance was against Jeff Neal, who took Garry to a split decision. Shavkat finished him in the third. Shavkat also finished Neil Magny. We saw Garry go the distance with Neil Magny. So when you consider the lack of finishes, the performances against common opponents, the well-roundedness coming from Shavkat, all these factors are giving us the line the way that it is. And when you watch the fights back, Shavkat obviously has a lot of advantages here. First, he's the better, more willing wrestler. We know that. We also know he's got more power in his hands, and he's the faster starter. Shavkat can give Garry trouble anywhere. He can hurt him in boxing range. We've seen lesser strikers like Jordan Williams and Song Kanan clip Garry on the feet. Shavkat's got a good chin, so he could take one to give one. I could also see him out wrestling Garry in this one. Garry's been taken down in the UFC before by guys like Darian Weeks, Gabe Green, Song Kanan again. Not exactly elite competition, so you might look at this and say that the writing is on the wall. Shavkat's going to have his way with him, and the betting line would suggest as much, but I don't think that's the case. For starters, it's a 5-round fight, and Garry's not this big muscle-bound guy. He's built like Gumby if he trained under Ido Portal, which can be helpful when it comes to cardio late in these fights. We saw Nate Diaz make a career off of torching guys late, and he was built like a melted candle. Shavkat Rakhmonov's got a 100% finish rate. He hasn't seen a 5th round the way that Garry has, so he's used to getting guys out of there, and now he's got to compete with a guy who's never been finished over 5 rounds. Secondly, Garry hasn't had perfect performances, but he finds ways to win. We've talked about this on the channel before. His biggest weapon is his patience. Garry's content to let the fight play out, let things develop, let opportunities present themselves, setting things up, using his movement to do so, point fighting at range, and it's not the most exciting all the time. It's not like Shavkat where he's going out there and smashing guys left and right, but he's winning. And thirdly, Shavkat Rakhmonov's been on the shelf for about a year now, and that's tough when you've got a really big fight coming up. Granted, he's been waiting for a big fight, and that's why he hasn't rushed into that. He's got time on his side at only 30 years old, but while he's been pretty inactive over the last, say, 3 years, Garry's been fighting consistently. So if Rakhmonov comes into this with a little bit of ring rust, or he tries to start too fast, I could see him having some trouble, especially late in this fight. So the line for me is not just wide, it's shocking. And I was an Garry denier at first. If you guys go back and watch the channel, I was waiting for the fade spot over and over again. I'd be like, this is probably the guy that gets him. This is probably the guy that gets him. And time again, he just proves people wrong, myself included. And sometimes in situations like that, if you want to take the position of, well, I've been off on this guy so many times that if I just keep fading him, eventually I'll be right. But I shook that a while ago because he's not only winning the fights, he's clearly getting better fight after fight, and he might not even be in his prime yet, which is why I think that Garry probably gets it done this week. The version of him that fought Darian Weeks would be finished in the first round against Shavkat Rakhmonov, but that's not who he is today, and that's where I think the difference is. I think a lot of people still look at him like that guy. I don't think he's that guy anymore. I expect a smart game plan here from Garry. I expect a lot of lateral movement, kicks to the legs, kicks to the body, staying busy if he does get taken down, getting right back up to his feet. And I think like midway through the third and in the fourth and fifth rounds is really when he's going to pull away. So I'll take the underdog here. I love the training situation for Garry. I like the performances that he's been putting up lately. I think that he's been getting a better fighter each and every time he's gone out there. And now this is the natural next step. And I've talked about how good I think Shavkat Rakhmonov is, but I think the line is a bit disrespectful here. So I'm going to go with Garry to get it done. I think he wins on the numbers. Give me Garry to win this fight by decision. And real quick, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. You know how the algorithm works, but if you don't know what to comment, tell me what you think about the co-main event. I'm interested to know. Next, we have a fight between Ciryl Gane and Alexandre Volkov. We've seen this fight before. This is a rematch, and Ciryl Gane won the first fight, I think 50-45 on most of the judges' scorecards over 5 rounds. The fact is, Ciryl Gane is better at MMA than Alexandre Volkov is. Simple as that. And Ciryl Gane, to me, is an elite heavyweight. And for some reason, people have diminished his skill set or downplay his abilities after losing to guys like Francis Ngannou and John Jones. If there were ever 2 fighters you can get a pass against, it's them. I don't hold that against him at all. Ciryl Gane's an elite heavyweight. He beats any other heavyweight not named Jones, Ngannou, Aspinall, and I don't expect Volkov to really be able to get a whole bunch going this week. I think Gane moves too well. The guy moves like a middleweight or better. I think he's going to keep Volkov guessing the whole time. I think he's going to get up on the numbers knowing he's only got to keep it up for 3 rounds. I expect Bon Gamin to float this week once again and cruise his way to a decision win. Give me Ciryl Gane to win by decision. Next, we're looking at a fight between Bryce Mitchell and Kron Gracie, and I'm going to tell you a little story and how it relates to this fight. So back in my college days, I threw a lot of parties, and sometimes the police would come and somebody in the house would tell me, or I would notice it myself. I'd go outside, I'd handle it. But one time there was a very big party, more people than we'd ever had, and I was in the basement of our house at the time. I get a text on my phone, the police are here. Okay, nothing new. I go upstairs, I'm gonna go handle it. I come up the stairs from the basement that led to the kitchen. There's 2 police officers standing right there. All I could think was, who the hell let you in here? And that's how I feel about Kron Gracie in the UFC. Who the hell let this guy in? After that fight against Charles Jourdain, I don't understand it. Who let you in, bro? Put up one of the worst outings of all time, and I was certain we would never see him compete in MMA again, but here we are. Now he's got to go up against Bryce Mitchell, who's coming at him with holy water, CTE, and camouflage. Don't even know how the fight was made, but I get it. I get that it might be compelling to some, but I feel like this is free real estate here. I think that Kron Gracie shouldn't be fighting anybody that's ranked or close to it. On the feet, I think Bryce Mitchell's much better. On the mat, this isn't a jiu-jitsu match. It's an MMA fight that jiu-jitsu is part of, so the punches, the elbows, the knees, they make a world of difference. And I think that even if the fight does hit the mat, Thug Nasty's going to do what he does. So I'll take the better fighter here overall, the rightful favorite. I'll take Bryce Mitchell to win this fight by decision. Now this is featherweight matchmaking I could get behind, with Nate the Train fighting Choi this week. Crazy pace coming from Nate the Train, always willing to put it all on the line, get it out of the fire, if you will. He feels a bit like the Darren Elkins of now, right? And I know that Darren Elkins is still there, but this is the damage right now. Tons of experience, as tough as they come, cardio for days, slick submissions as well. He's won 4 of his last 5 as well, so he's getting hot, and he's getting hot at the right time. And Choi, you could say maybe the same thing. Maybe he's getting hot. Coming off of his first win since the summer of 2016. He knocked out Bill Algeo last time out. Before that, the last time he won, Drake was looking for revenge. But he caught Bill Algeo, closed him out in the 2nd round. Now is Bill Algeo washed? I think he might be. So do I really think that the Superboy is back? I'm not so sure, but what I am sure of is that Nate the Train is very hittable. We've seen him hurt and knocked out in the past, like against Herbert Burns, where he was knocked out with a knee, flying knee against Julian Erosa. These are techniques that land so heavy that if you get knocked out, it really doesn't mean anything. I'm not faulting him for that. It's not like I'm saying, oh, you got a bad chin, you got knocked out by a flying knee. So would an elephant. It doesn't matter. But he was dropped by Dan Ige. He was dropped by David Onama as well, nearly finished in that fight. And Choi, he's also been knocked out. But power for power, as far as just the hands go, I think Doo-Ho Choi's got a little bit more pop at the end of his shots. And that really comes from cleaner technique, right? Doo-Ho Choi throws that laser of a right hand. So I could see him hurting Landwehr when the fight is at boxing range. And Nate the Train could end up hurting him there as well. But I think the more likely outcome if they both start throwing punches at the same time in boxing range, that Doo-Ho Choi is going to get home. He's going to get home first, and it's going to be a straighter punch rather than a looping punch over the guard. Now, if Landwehr comes out with a grappling heavy approach, I could see him having a lot of success in this fight. Doo-Ho Choi is only a fight removed from getting taken down 5 times by Kyle Nelson. So Landwehr is better on the mat. He snatches up anaconda chokes like it's nobody's business. So he does have the advantage there, but I don't know if you can bank on that, because not only is he looking to win, he's also looking to entertain. Like against David Onama, we saw him get up from a dominant position multiple times in that fight, which was sick. And I wish more fighters did that because it's cooler to see. But also, when you got your hard-earned on the line, it's a little frightening. But since you can't really trust that he's going to go out there and take the path of least resistance more than trying to put on a show for the fans, which I respect more, I feel better taking value by attacking the underdog here. And you can get a better price on Choi by taking Choi by knockout. I'd love to see Nate the Train get it done, but getting up there at 36 years of age. He's had a lot of wars. We see the way that he fights, and Choi's not that much younger. He's had wars as well, but he's been out of competition for a while. Hasn't taken as much damage lately necessarily. And he did look much better in his last fight, and you would expect that fight against Kyle Nelson for him to look like he wasn't 100% right after that long layoff. Against Bill Algeo, get a little bit closer, and now he's 3 fights in, didn't really get hurt at all against Kyle Nelson, did his dance on Bill Algeo, and now he's probably coming in. I don't know if he's the Korean Superboy of old, but he's probably closer to that than he was, at least in his last 2 fights. So I'm going to take Doo-Ho Choi to get it done this week. I think he ends up winning by knockout, and he probably finds himself on the official betting article this week, fully planned to crush this going into the holidays so that you have a little bit of extra gelt for Christmas time. So if you want the official betting article of the week, as well as the parlays, the community access, you've got the lineup optimizer, data model, projections. This is for those of you that play DFS, whether that's DraftKings building lineups, whether that's Underdog. All of that can be found on kunithmma.com with a total access package. That'll be linked in the description and in a pinned comment. Back to the breakdown. Next, we have a fight between Anthony Smith fighting Dominick Reyes this week, a layup, which happens from time to time on pay-per-view cards, but that's what's happening in this fight. We picked Reyes to get back on track last time out against Dustin Jacoby, and he really couldn't miss in that fight. Started fast, trusted his power, and looked like the Dominick Reyes of old. Now, I know on paper, Anthony Smith is better, but in the real world, Dominick Reyes knocks him out and does it with ease. Lionheart can surprise people every now and again by springing an upset here and there, but I don't think that's one of these fights. I don't think he's going to be able to get Dominick Reyes on the mat, and that would really be the only place where I think he catches him, like with a submission, because Anthony Smith is pretty slick when the fight hits the mat, but I don't think he's able to get him down there. If John Jones couldn't get him to the mat, I don't think Anthony Smith's going to be able to. And I don't think he's going to outstrike the bigger, younger, faster striker who probably knocks him out, and I think he does it with a head kick this week out of that southpaw stance. He flicks that leg up pretty quickly. So easy one. Don't overthink it. Take the prop for better odds. Give me Dominick Reyes to win this fight by knockout. Next, we have a fight between Themba Gorimbo fighting Vicente Luque. Let me know in the comments if I am living in a fantasy world, but how in God's name is Themba Gorimbo favored in this fight? I don't understand it. I need you to explain it to me like I'm 5. Is he favored because he was able to keep taking down Nico Price? Because he held on to Ramiz Brahimaj for 3 rounds? Because he knocked out Pete Rodriguez, who isn't a UFC fighter? Because he beat Takashi Sato? This is Vicente Luque we're talking about. Am I going crazy? He's fought everyone, and he's ranked number 2 all time in the UFC's welterweight division when it comes to finishes. His recent losses are to guys like Bilal Muhammad, the champion, Jeff Neal, who would put Themba Gorimbo on a hoodie, Joaquin Buckley, who might be a win away from fighting for the title. Loses to these guys, he gets a pass in my eyes. I don't see where Themba Gorimbo has much of an advantage here. Maybe he can get to the clinch, try to control Luque, maybe trip takedown, hold his way there to victory for minutes on end. If he does that, sure. But at striking range, I think Luque gets the best of him with those kicks, especially to the body. I think he can really slow down that forward pressure coming from Gorimbo. I think if they do hit the clinch and Themba Gorimbo opens up the chance for Vicente Luque to wrap up a submission, it's over. You just have a guy who's been there, done that, fought some of the best. I know that he's probably beyond his prime, not in terms of age, but in terms of damage taken, but Themba Gorimbo's no spring chicken either, and he's gotten layups each and every time he's gone out there. And you might say, oh, Nico Price isn't a layup. I mean, he certainly looked like one. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he's seen no resistance so far in his UFC run outside of his debut where he fought AJ Fletcher, who's since been cut from the promotion. You go back and watch that fight. Themba Gorimbo has his back, the best position in MMA, and within 10 seconds he's getting guillotined. I would never trust a guy like that against top flight competition, and I do look at Vicente Luque still as one of the better fighters in the division, right, despite the losses recently. So give me Vicente Luque to win this fight. Give me the silent assassin. Give me the underdog somehow. I think he ends up winning this fight inside the distance. Next we have Movsar Evolev. He's fighting Aljamain Sterling this week. Interesting fight for top featherweights because these guys can easily make a case for a title shot with a win here. Aljamain Sterling is coming off of a dominant win over Calvin Kattar. Was it the most fun you've ever had watching a fight? Probably not, but it's Aljamain Sterling. What do we expect? But he did what he had to do to get his hand raised, and after a long and successful career at bantamweight, he made good on his featherweight debut, and he's looking to reclaim gold here in this division. I will say though, at 35 years old, with all of the training camps, all of the championship training camps at that, I don't know how much longer he plans to fight, and that worries me in this one. I think Aljamain Sterling is a loss away from retiring, because what else is there to prove? I think seeing a guy like Merab succeed and other guys in his gym working their way up, getting into the UFC, winning fights, that's what's making him happy, right? He's made his money, he has his businesses, you know, Iaquinta hooked him up with a couple multi-families along the way. So financially, the Funk Master's chilling. A lot of guys that we watch in the UFC, they're fighting for money. I don't think he's fighting for money necessarily anymore, although that show money's probably pretty nice. But on the other side, you have Movsar Evloev, who won't eat sugar until he becomes the UFC champion. That's the difference. You have a guy who seemingly has it all and owns his own rum now. And for MMA fighters getting into the dark liquor business, it's not looking too hot right now, while the other guy's laser focused on his goal. So I expect Evloev to come in here and dominate for all 3 rounds, because he's not the kind of guy who's going to get taken down or get his back taken or accept a bad position on the mat. He's forward, always, like a shark. He's going to be the one getting takedowns. Last time out against Arnold Allen, the striking looks much improved. I think that he's going to be racking up multiple takedowns against Aljo as well, getting him to the ground. Aljo gets back to his feet, remats him, so on and so forth. We've seen him do it many times before. And I think that'll nullify the few big advantages that Aljo has in this fight. Like, for example, the kicking game at range. I think that Aljamain Sterling can really light him up with kicks, but because Evloev is so forward with that pressure, he's going to crowd him and nullify that kicking game. And where Aljo's best is backpacking guys, getting on the back, not letting them up, and working his submissions, landing a lot of good strikes from the back, but Evloev probably doesn't let him get in that position because he's going to be the one on top. The type of guy that's going to be needed to beat a Movsar Evloev is a guy who can really crack him on the feet and stuff a few takedowns along the way, like Ilia Topuria, maybe a Yusuf Zalal, I think might eat his lunch. Diego Lopez in a rematch is very live, of course, but a grappler like Aljo, I don't see it. So give me the undefeated Russian to remain an undefeated Russian. Give me Movsar Evloev, whatever you want to call it. I think he wins this fight by decision. Next we have a fight between Randy Brown. He's fighting Bryan Battle this week. You guys know, if you've watched the channel, how I feel about Bryan Battle. The dude is a problem. Last time out against Kevin Jousset, who's a good striker, he just walked him down, threw more punches, didn't let his foot off the gas until he was out of there. Looked like he just wanted it more, took it from him in front of his people. We saw him cut through AJ Fletcher on the mat in the fight before that. We saw him face plant Gabe Green in 14 seconds in Charlotte. We saw him knock out Takashi Sato in under a minute with a head kick. The dude is a problem. Now he struggled against Rinat Fakhretdinov on short notice. You run that fight back with a full camp, Bryan Battle beats him. But he does have a tall task on his hands this week with rude boy Randy Brown, who can match his size. Randy Brown's got a decent chin. He's been doing this at a very high level for a very long time. He's riding a winning streak of his own, and it's not the first time he's gone on a winning streak in the UFC. And the only time he loses are to some of the best fighters in the division. Like, we look at Neil Magny, for example, as the gatekeeper at 170 pounds, but everybody gets through the damn gate. So what is it? If you can compete with the top fighters at 170 pounds, then you can beat Randy Brown. But if you can't, then Randy Brown's going to prove that to you. And that's what it comes down to for me. I think Bryan Battle has the right stuff to compete with the best welterweights on the roster currently. He's as scrappy as they come. He can mix the martial arts. He's got a nose for finding finishes. So give me Bryan Battle this week. The power in his hands, the willingness to let those hands go. I think that's what's going to give Randy Brown trouble. Give me Bryan Battle to win this fight by knockout. Next we have a fight that we already broke down with Chris Weidman and Eryk Anders. I'm just going to put it in right there. Go ahead, Oscar, get it in there. Next we have a fight between Chris Weidman and Eryk Anders in a fight that surprisingly has a combined age that is lower than the guys in the main event. They're in New York, so of course the Chris Weidman plug is going to have to be on there, of course. Just an auto but lock button on the New York cards. He's coming off of a win over Bruno Silva, where he was knuckles deep in Bruno Silva's eyes with impunity, mind you. But regardless, big win for him. He really needed it after the injury against Uriah Hall, after losing that decision, every round of it, basically, to Brad Tavares. And it's not unfair to say that Chris Weidman is beyond his prime. He's not what he once was, and that's okay. At 40 years old, that's going to happen. But this guy is still willing to mix it up. He's still willing to wrestle effectively, fire low kicks even though that leg snapped, and he still can give you a decent 3 rounds. Now on the other side, Eryk Anders been grappling like a maniac, not only in the UFC but outside of the UFC. He's competed in grappling competitions pretty regularly. He had 5 takedowns in his last fight, shot for 13 of them throughout that fight against Marc-Andre Barriol. He attempted 11 takedowns. On the numbers, he attempted 24 takedowns against Jung Young Park. Eryk Anders doesn't want to strike anymore. It's not his game. He wants to fight along the fence. He wants to get to the clinch, find a dominant position on top, ride out the rounds that way. Weidman seems more than comfortable to use his length, strike at a distance, but he would still prefer to do the same thing that Eryk Anders wants to do. He wants to fight to the mat, get in a dominant position, ride it out for the round. So to me, the fight's going to come down to who can get to their spot earlier and more consistently throughout the fight. While we've seen him fade and fade hard before, I think that Eryk Anders is going to give us more in the third. He's old, but Weidman's older, and he's dealt with injuries, championship fight camps, and I feel like there's more left in the tank for Eryk Anders, while I feel like Chris Weidman's just trying to cash a couple more checks. You know that show money's probably robust for him at this point. I feel like there's just a bit more left in the tank for Eryk Anders. I feel like this is a winnable fight for him. I feel like he's going to be the stronger fighter once they get into the clinch, so give me a boy. Not my boy. Eryk Anders to win by decision. Next, we're looking at a fight between Cody Durden and Joshua Van. Great scrap here, and I could see it going either way. Joshua Van's coming off of what you can consider a comeback win over Edgar Chairez, where he just wouldn't go away. Like, Chairez started hot, but surprisingly faded a bit, which you didn't expect in that fight, or at least I didn't. But when he did start to fade, Van started to take over. But he was getting touched up in the early stages of that fight, and it looked like a continuation of the third round against Charles Johnson, where Johnson just started fast in that round, knocked him out, got him out of there. Now for Cody Durden, I think he can make things very uncomfortable for Joshua Van by starting fast, getting on him in a hurry, and using his wrestling, of course. If he doesn't do that, though, I think Van can end up knocking him out. We saw against Bruno Silva. Silva looked like he was dead in the water against Durden, and then ends up knocking him out with a clean uppercut. We saw against Matt Schnell. Schnell was touching him up before making that grave error that allowed Cody Durden to snatch up a guillotine. He got very lucky there, in my opinion. And when these two are going to be at boxing range this week, I think the cleaner, tighter boxing is coming from Joshua Van, and I think that makes a big difference. And if Joshua Van can defend takedowns here, he should cruise. Now, we've seen him taken down in the UFC before, but he has shored up that takedown defense. His last 2 opponents were not able to get him down, and the ones that were able to get him down weren't able to keep him there. So I think Joshua Van, being the better striker, the more explosive athlete, I expect him to hurt Cody Durden multiple times in this fight, and he probably finishes him in the 2nd or 3rd round. Now, if Cody Durden can get to the back, I think that's where Van's going to have problems. I don't know what that submission defense is going to look like. I don't know if it will really matter, because Cody Durden's a dog on a bone once he's able to get into a good position. So wouldn't surprise me either to see Cody Durden win this fight by submission, but I do think that the more likely outcome here is the younger man finds the chin at some point. Give me Joshua Van to win this fight by knockout. Next, we have a fight between Max Griffin. He's fighting Michael Chiesa this week. The line for this surprised me a bit. I thought we would have to pay a premium for Max Griffin in this spot, but we don't. So Mazel tov. I really like Max Payne here. He's got real stunning power in his hands. He knows what Michael Chiesa's looking to do as well. It's wrestle or bust for Chiesa. Now, if he can wrestle and control his way to victory, then he has a chance. And the reason why I say control is because he probably doesn't submit Max Griffin here. Max Griffin never been submitted in 30 professional fights. Really, he's only been finished once in his entire 30-fight career. Lifelong martial artist, he's not going to give up a whole lot so easily. Now, on the other side, we've seen Michael Chiesa lose inside the distance 6 out of 7 times. So we know what Michael Chiesa is going to do. He's going to look for those takedowns. He's going to try to find a dominant position, either ride out the round or look for a submission. But I expect, if we know that, Max Griffin and his team probably know that as well. So if you're Max Griffin, what do? Well, you keep the feet. How do you keep the feet? Well, you try to stay in the center of the octagon. You don't settle against the fence. You use lateral movement. You keep him off of you by throwing stuff up the middle like jabs, uppercuts, knees, and maybe, just maybe, you be the one that's playing offense when it comes to the wrestling. I think that Max Griffin can do all of those things. Like, he's not somebody who probably was ever going to fight for a title. Obviously, at 39 years old, that window is closed now, but he's solid. He's a knockout artist as well. And I think there's an outside shot that he probably hurts Michael Chiesa with the hands early in this fight. At the time of recording this, I'm not really sure what the line is for Max Griffin by knockout, but if you want to take a small shot on him plus a normal play on his money line, I think that would make sense. Give me Max Payne to get it done this week. I think he wins by knockout or decision. And the last two fights that we're going to look at, there's not much we need to go into here. Chase Hooper is a gigantic favorite against Clay Guida, as he should be. 17-year age gap. He's taller. He's longer. He's a better grappler. If you don't think that's the case, watch their grappling match. And Chase Hooper, he's just been getting better and better each and every time. And at 25 years old, the rate of his improvement is so high that it's even faster than the rate of the decline coming from Clay Guida, who's a legend. I believe the first live event that I watched was Clay Guida, Diego Sanchez, which, if you know what that fight is, that's why I am who I am now. Hooked ever since. So always got a special spot in my heart for Clay Guida, but this is easy work. He's going to be worm food for Chase the Dream. So give me Chase Hooper to win this fight. I think he ends up winning by submission. And this last fight here, Lucas Brzeski's got to thank Walter Walker for the show money that he's about to get this week, because I thought that this guy was on his way out of town. Kennedy Nzechukwu finally gets the fight in actual heavyweight. It's not Chris Barnett who's showing up and hurting himself right before the fight starts. No, he's fighting Lucas Brzeski, who's game, who's going to push a pace, who's going to give him a competitive fight, but I don't think that he's athletic enough, fast enough, hits hard enough, or is going to be able to get the fight to the ground well enough to give Kennedy Nzechukwu any kind of issues. If Kennedy loses this fight, it's kind of like a classic Kennedy Nzechukwu low IQ moment. If Brzeski wants to win, he's got to channel some of that Haitian voodoo that OSP put on Kennedy Nzechukwu not too long ago, but I don't know if he's got OSP in his contact list, if you know what I mean. I think that Kennedy Nzechukwu walks through him. I think he's way more athletic, way physically stronger, hits a lot harder. I think he's going to get home on these punches first, especially with that reach advantage as well. So give me Kennedy Nzechukwu to win this fight. I believe he's going to end up winning by knockout. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. What are these finger guns? Why would you put finger guns in the script? And I'll see you later in the week for final picks. Let's go.